And we go now to Chris Budihas. You are one of those people who have said from the very beginning that this was not going to be an overnight war.
And here we are.
Many overnights later.
Yeah, it's interesting. And listen to Eben. I mean, there's a lot going on to unpack here. But last week I spent some time at an Army post with some pretty senior leaders, and big conversation we're having, which kind of bleeds a little bit out of what Eben was talking about, was the long-term impacts of readiness, specifically related to Army because they're Army. But it also goes across a joint force. So a lot of folks don't realize that a lot of the operational and maintenance funds and readiness funds for training for our military have been swept up for the rest of the fiscal year into funding Epic Fury. So typical training, maintenance of equipment, things of that nature, which is not just here in the continental United States, but also for forces stationed in South Korea, Japan, Europe, and such, has a long-term impact. So, when I think about, listening to you, if we're not prepared to do
Don't
this,
listen to me.
Think about it. If we're not prepared to do this for 4 years, I mean, it seems right now we're going from week to week, day to day, and then the talking points do not keep an informed public of what's really going on here, and there's long-term implications of what we're doing. And so I'm definitely against Iran ever having a nuclear weapon. However, we kind of need to figure this out. I don't think we need to rush to failure, coming up with a bad option. As I mentioned you off air, I listened to yesterday Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana kind of talk about the various types of options. And it seems that not just him, but others are talking about this tit-for-tat strategy. They bomb us, we bomb them. That doesn't work. It doesn't work at all.
And it has never worked.
It's never worked. The historical precedence is that it does not work. So for our audience out there who think that blockades and air campaigns win wars, that is a false. That is not capable of doing that. Those in the Air Force, my airmen friends that are strategists like me, and a little bit well read in history, all know that that's not a true statement. So putting boots on the ground seems to be a penetration line we don't want to step across, which is fine. But yeah, there's definitely some implications of what we're doing. And then as you put on the backdrop, and of course this is getting more chatter now in mainstream media, the midterm elections. And let's be honest, war is basically policy by another means. So as our politics by another means. So as we prosecute this war, we prepare for the long run of doing this. I mean, we're of a certain age, so let's remember back to 2003 with the invasion of Iraq. We thought it was going to be over, it's going to be great. Then lo and behold, 20 years later, matter of fact, up to this day, we're still there. So what's the long-term implications of it? We really need to think about that. And then how do we get to an end state? And the Iranians are a piece of that negotiation or destruction if we're going to escalate.
So first of all, I want to thank you for being the first guest on In Depth since I got back, because I don't think that anybody else could handle the level of energy that I have after, being away for a week. And so I've got lots and lots of questions for you. But one of the things that you just talked about was things that the public is supposed to know, the benefits of an informed public. I surmise that, and it's one of the reasons for the existence of this show, is to inform the public and to go kind of in places where other people are not going to go.
Right.
Is an informed public dangerous to this administration, to any administration?
No, it's not, because an informed public elects the politicians who reflect them. They are the servants of the people. And if you elect the people who reflect you and your values, and they're going to achieve the goals which you think are in line with your values, then that is a good thing. Period.
And I agree. I agree on the, and I think most journalists would agree, and that's why we do what we do, in the realm of we're allowed to have an opinion. I think informing the public is definitely one thing on which we all agree.
Yeah, and then it goes back to, I heard a term this morning talking about going on the stump to support somebody, and other politicians support another politician. Well, it goes back to, another, comment I made last week talking to a variety of friends and then senior military leaders is, this idea of civil discourse. Though we don't agree, we can at least have a conversation. And, oh, by the way, as I mention to people periodically, I love to have a facts-based argument. Let's get outside of the TikToks and the Instagram and actually get down to the actual facts. And I met with a friend, and I was over at his house last week, and both of his kids, one of their kids, they're in their early 30s now.
Kids.
They're air guardsmen, and they're active duty air guardsmen. And one of them's a KC-135 boom operator, so helps refuel other aircraft, and basically he's making the rounds between Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Jordan. And he was in a bunker, and there was Iranian drones flying over the airfield, and all of a sudden one identified a KC-130, which is a refueling aircraft, on the ground, and literally took a nosedive and blew it up. That was one video, and the other video was a couple days later. He's up in Kuwait, and I believe it was a C-17. It flew over and it was destroyed that aircraft too. So it's interesting. There's a lot to unpack here, but the danger is real. Our folks are out there. It's in our best interest to kind of figure out what the right strategy is to not necessarily end it quickly, but to get to the final result or better peace, if you will, that we're trying to achieve in this conflict.
So just to go back, the C-17 was destroyed, or the C-17
It was destroyed.
It was destroyed.
Yeah, by basically a $75,000 drone, which is interesting, right? So I know we're get in the conversation about, our magazine depth, if you will, of our critical types of munitions that we have out there. But and again, this cost proposition of the Iranians flying, and we see in the Ukraine too, right? For flying drones, a couple $100,000 or less, in many cases, tens of thousands of dollars, destroying assets that are in the $340 million space. So I think there's a lot to take out of the proposition for the cost of warfare, one. And then the two is the other thing, that our folks are in danger every single day. To kind of, watching on TV and hear this periodically, we tend to forget that we got, people in our community out there serving abroad right now, and they're doing great work, but we got to support them the best we can. In many cases, that's being that informed public to make sure at the midterms we're actually hiring the people that we want to, support and represent us, and not just in the local, but also the state and the federal level.
A C-17, according to online sources, cost approximately $340 million, and you're saying it was taken out by a $75,000 drone.
Yep. How's that math?
The maths don't point to the fact that we're winning. I tell you that right now.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have talked about in the past and seems to be coming to a head again is, and Eben Brown had said, we're still hitting them. We're still fighting. A lot of news about our military stockpiles.
Yes.
I know that you're not actively in, but I know that you still talk to folks.
Every single day I'm talking to folks. I'm very well connected in this space.
I'm trying not to damage
through my consulting and startups. Yeah, no, I say that not in a bragging way, just a reality of the business I do, that I'm pretty plugged in this space. You
are very plugged in, and I'm trying to not do damage to your existing relationships by exploiting that on the air. However, You are very in touch with all of that. Should we be concerned about our military stockpiles if, in fact, Iran, with a $75,000 drone, is killing a $340 million aircraft?
100%. Yeah, I think this is an inflection point that we need to just take a look at, from a variety of angles. One, as a result of the Cold War. Look it up, kids. Going away, and then in the 1989-90 time frame, we reduced a lot of our military industrial complex for producing munitions. And as a result, we are in current state where we didn't believe we needed as many munitions as we need now, and the demand signal has gone up. And As I mentioned off air before, we look back 2 years, and back when the Ukrainians are still shooting a lot of munitions, specifically artillery munitions and rockets, but we dipped into the South Korean stockpiles, and the South Koreans literally gave us 155 howitzer field artillery rounds to basically give to the Ukrainians. So that shows you a level of depth that we do not have here as a nation that we need to take a look at. Is that an immediate issue right this second? Yes, that is a problem now. Some of it's exquisite, like the Patriot missile, which is millions of dollars, shooting down a $50,000 drone. That's not a good cost proposition, but that's the result of degrading some of our air defense capabilities, post Cold War over, 2 to 3 decades, and not having new technologies. And so now, in the backdrop of the fact that we need to reinvest in our military industrial complex, specifically in the munitions space, that's a call for action, one. And then number two, not helping us is the defense acquisition system is so cumbersome that it prevents a lot of abilities, because we have some commercial off-the-shelf capabilities we could probably, bring into theater now to directly help our forces, but we have a scaling issue.
Chris, that's quite the intellectual word salad. So I'm just going to ask you one quick question.
Yeah.
Is the U.S. military, for lack of a better analogy,
yes,
in danger of running out of bullets? And by bullets, I mean the entire arsenal.
Yes, in danger. The question is at what speed? That's an unknown, right? I mean, we know down to the amount of munitions. We know down to the specific number of rockets and ammunition on hand right now. What we don't know is if the Iranians were to, it was back in the day when we were dealing with the Soviets, do a crazy Ivan, if they did a crazy Iranian and then they threw a lot of stuff at us at once. And, America, we like our wars fast, cheap, and bloodless. If we took a lot of casualties and we were to escalate, it would be a question of when we would run out of certain types of munitions that may affect some type of offensive operation, whether that's ground, maritime, and or on, and in the air also.
And if we know that, on this program,
our military folks are dealing with it every day. I talked about every single day last week at the location I was at.
And our military knows that, and our people know that. Iran definitely knows that.
Oh, absolutely.
My guest is retired Colonel Chris Budihas. He is also the host of First Coast Military Life. Before I forget, what do you have coming up on the show this weekend?
This weekend, I'm talking to Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins, talking about not only military service, but public service and, what's the state of Florida, what's in play, what's going on. And we don't really get into the election too much, but, he talks about his service and, what he's doing here for all our Floridians.
And how much he has sacrificed personally in his own service.
Yeah, it's amazing. He's got an amazing story. I mean, regardless of your politics, the fact that him and another Green Beret sewed him up after being wounded, and later, basically during an explosion, or it's wrecked his leg. Years later, decided to amputate because it was better to amputate than just continue with a series of surgeries, which wasn't going to get him kind of back in action. But he continued to serve as an amputee in Special Forces, and then obviously came down here after retirement. Ran for politics and was selected later to be lieutenant governor for our state.
Nothing can prepare you for that kind of injury. Nothing can prepare you for seeing that kind of injury. No matter all the training that you can possibly get, nothing prepares you for that.
No, not at all.
Speaking of training, I think we had teased this morning on Jacksonville's Morning News with Rich Jones a little bit about your training. You've been through quite the number of courses. And am I wrong? You went through 2 forms of basic training, both as an officer and enlisted?
Yeah. So
reverse that, as enlisted, then as an officer.
Enlisted as an officer. So, being from the great area of Jacksonville, my dad was Navy, enlisted sailor at NAS Jackson, then was the command master chief over Mayport before he retired in 91. Him being Navy, I had to join the Marine Corps. So, I went to Parris Island in 87, and it was great training. And then later, I was, after Desert Storm, selected. I was a non-commissioned officer to go basically pursue a commission. And I came back here, lived on the west side, as they say, the west side, the best side. My wife worked downtown, and then I worked at JU had to be part of the ROTC. It was a great experience, and then was commissioned as a Marine Corps officer. But yeah, summers between my junior and my senior year went to Officer Candidate School up in Quantico, Virginia, and definitely two different experiences. Definitely very physical fitness oriented in many cases, but the attrition and then the kind of the mission statement between the two were a little bit different in many cases.
So there was a difference because it was Army and Marines first of all?
No, it was Marine and Marine. So
it was Marine and Marine.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how was the enlisted training different from the officer basic training?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Like, what's the purpose? What's the mission behind what you're trying to do as an organization? So, in the Marine Corps, trying to make a basic Marine. So, going through boot camp, becoming that basic Marine, as they say, every Marine's a rifleman. So, big piece is obviously physical fitness on the near end. That's where most of your attrition occurs, and then second phase is oriented on marksmanship training, and only the Marines do marksmanship the way you really need to be doing as a service. Really, literally reaching out and touching somebody at 500 yards, and then later on the back end is the field training. But again, it's more individually focused. Though a team effort, you're evaluated as an individual.
In officer training?
No, that's enlisted.
Okay.
And when you go to officer training, you're expected to be physically fit. The attrition rate is pretty high at the beginning, and then it kind of
the number of people who drop out.
The people drop out, right? And then the people that really want to be there, those that don't want to be there, they're gonna leave in the first couple of weeks because of the harassment packages, we call it. But they are evaluating that you become a leader. So you have senior non-commissioned officers, in our case with the Marine Corps, staff sergeants, gunnery sergeants. They're evaluating your leadership. So you're put in leadership positions as a candidate, and they are literally 24/7 watching you and your capability, and you'll be put in different positions as the acting platoon commander, platoon sergeant, squad leader, you name it. But you're under a magnifying glass to see if you can cut it as a leader or not. And just knowing friends and serving in the joint environment for a number of years, I know all the other at different levels, if you will, but all the officer training courses, officer candidate schools, is in the Air Force, OTS, officer training school. They're evaluating under a leadership lens to see if you have the attributes and the values and the morality to be a leader. Effective leader.
So if someone's listening right now and they're thinking about either enlisting or going to officer school, there's no such thing as the officer training is easier than.
Actually, I would say this, so for me, I mean this humbly, I'm pretty physically fit even to this day within reason, but back then I was definitely more physically fit. So for me, like boot camp, yeah, the sand fleas really sucked, but the reality of it is I was still pretty physically fit. I mean, the runs, I think the furthest run we did was 5 miles, and, I was running a lot back then. So when I went to officer candidate school, we ran, we carried heavy weights, we did a lot of stuff. So it was meant if you didn't show up on day one, boot camp, you could show up and not be in great shape, and they're gonna build you up, as they say, or break you down to build you up. Whereas an officer candidate school, day one, you're under the magnifying glass, and they're watching you to see if you can do what you do. So, this the most non-sexist way. It was kind of a boys' school back then, and they were literally, these senior non-commissioned officers are looking you through the lens, their prism of, do I want this individual to be somebody in charge of me in the future? And for many of them, that's a very high standard, and you had to meet that standard, or you were literally told, thank you for your service, but we don't need you.
And that's not unusual. And no offense taken that it was a boys' school. It kind of still is a boys' school.
Well, it's a Marine Corps, right? In gender integration, they're the last ones to do it. And even I question, how gender integrated it is. But, when I was the chief of staff at Benning, ironically, Benning's officer candidate school is right there on Fort Benning to see. It's not an easy course for those that don't have any enlisted background. They actually send them to basic training first, and then they come over to officer candidate school. So, again, you're going to get trained, and then you're going to be evaluated as a leader in your capability. And do a couple of bad apples get through. Obviously, that occurs because I know some folks out there. In everything. It happens all the time. There's going to be some folks listening right now who are like, well, this guy, or this gal, she came through and blah, blah, blah. But that's in everything you do. But yeah, I will say that the ability to serve as an officer, there is certain criteria that you got to meet in order to be commissioned. And it's my experience was great. Did
it help you, do you think, in your career personally and professionally to have gone enlisted first?
For me, it did. So I went to a little place called Orange Park High School, and I was probably not as mature as I needed to be. Did I do okay in academics? Sure. I just didn't apply myself like the last 2 years. So for me, going enlisted, serving as a squad leader during Desert Storm, being responsible for a whole squad in combat, and then going to college. I mean, it was funny. I was sitting in class. I remember this to this day. I'm in the, I went to JU, so basketball is kind of a big thing over there. And I was in my humanities class. It was my first semester, and a couple of basketball players come in, and they are, one late, two just complaining about all the hard work they have to do. And at the time, they had to only take, I believe it was like 4 courses. And here I am. I'm taking 6 classes per semester. I was more focused. I was more mature. I'd seen, as you mentioned, things that most people have never seen. And it was just like, I got a perspective and I got a reason for being here. And at the time I was engaged. So, I was getting married, within a couple months there. So a little bit different purpose. So, and I've had this trick question over 36 years in the military. Is it better? Should all officers be prior enlisted? The answer is no. I met prior enlisted officers. Most of them are average, if not above average, if not superior. But I met some guys that really aren't as good. They lean on that way too much. That I was prior enlisted. It's like, okay, give me a break. That whole Janet, what is it, Janet Jackson, Whitney Houston, what have you done for me lately? So, get over yourself and move on. But
that's a big part of it, right? Getting over yourself, because the people who are not over themselves do not do well in any of those environments, with some exceptions.
Not at all. It's funny. So being in the Army, so I'd have Army generals ask me these questions. Which one's better, the Marine Corps or the Army? And of course, all the Marines are listening right now. I'd be like, of course it's the Marine Corps. But my answer to them was like, it's like a Granny Smith and a red apple. Looks a little different, tastes a little different, a lot more the same than different. But there's definitely some attributes I would take from the Marine Corps that I'd love to see in the Army, and then some opportunities in the Army I'd love to see in the Marine Corps. But overall, it's the joint team. We all fight together, and it's been a great experience for me.
Do you think high schools should have maybe not a mandatory service requirement, but an ROTC or NJROTC or whatever
I think it should be an option. I was in the Navy JROTC over there at Orange Park High School. I mean, it was at the time Commander Lusk was our senior instructor, and then Lieutenant Elrod was a former enlisted guy, became a line duty officer, retired as a lieutenant, but he had been in the UDT's pre-SEAL team and then in the SEALs and early in Vietnam. So to have two, one was an F-4 pilot in Vietnam, and then somebody that was a SEAL in Vietnam as your mentors. I think that was great. I think there should be more JROTCs across the nation. But however, I will say this, that it should not be mandatory. I got a couple friends that are, and I won't mention who they are, in the local area.
They know they're listening.
Yeah, they are listening. So JROTCs, sometimes the administration thinks it's a penal colony for some of their kids. But I think it's a great opportunity because going back to missions, right? You asked about boot camp, and then you asked about Officer Candidate School. The mission of the JROTC, to kind of summarize it, is to develop better citizens, within the organization. It is not there to make kids want to join the military, though one of the attributes is your exposure may lend you to want to actually pursue at least an opportunity in the military, whether that's a career or enlistment or, 4 or 5 year stint as an officer. So I think it's great. My experience goes back to the fact that, you have these retirees that are willing to go into what I would call another selfless service in education. God bless our educators out there to help train and educate these young kids and not just military skills, but also citizenship. Which I think is definitely an area we could all use a little bit more education in.
And it's not only retirees. There are some active duty who serve in ROTC programs.
ROTC at college level.
Yeah.
at the college level. Yep.
And also, I think a lot of parents of high school students do not know that every school has different ROTC programs. So just because you're in an ROTC, it could be a Navy, it could be Army, it could be Air Force, Marines.
Marines
Navy.
have one.
Okay.
I'm waiting for that Space Force one to
come
out.
Yeah. Seems like a heavy recruiting tool. I just thought it was important to highlight that because I think a lot of people think ROTC is just one thing.
Yeah.
One branch of service.
It's not. It's all the services and minus the Coast Guard, which is actually part of the Department of Homeland Security unless mobilized under the Department of Navy. But yeah, I mean, it's a great and people have heard of it. It's funny you mentioned that because my parents, or specifically my mother, who's from North Carolina originally, JROTC was kind of a requirement. I remember my uncle saying when he went to college, he went to one of the universities up there in North Carolina, that he had to, of course, this is early in Vietnam years, had to do 2 semesters of ROTC at the college. So I'm not sure if that was a college requirement or if that was just...
Or if it was strongly encouraged.
Strongly encouraged back then, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, we're going to change gears just a little bit. My guest is Colonel Chris Budihas, retired Colonel Chris Budihas, the host of First Coast Military Life. On Friday, an F-35 fighter jet crashed in California. It was a Marine Corps plane. No one was injured. The pilot was able to eject safely. They have not yet released a cause. The pilot was brought to a facility and said to be in stable condition for evaluation and treatment. Non-life-threatening injuries, no other injuries were reported. Does it seem like we're reporting on this more and more? Are we?
Yeah, I need to do a little more research. It kind of feels like that, right? I was watching the news this weekend after I was traveling and kind of catching up, and evidently they said the same squadron had an F-18 go down, but typically most squadrons don't mix F-18s and F-35s as a new joint strike fighter. But maybe they're in transition. I don't know, but yeah, I mean it's occurring. Here's the first thing I'll say: all my friends in aviation. Military aviation is dangerous, regardless. We tax the heck out of it right now. We always have in the last number of decades. So whatever we do is very dangerous. But I think we kind of got to take a look at. Maybe there's going to be a safety stand down and take a look at what occurred. Now I've been around the F-35. It's an amazing piece of equipment. The fact this happened on Friday, now we're here on Monday. That's not a lot of time. Matter of fact, that's 0 working days in between. So no doubt, you just dealing with the aviation community, they're going to thoroughly investigate this to determine if it was a pilot error or was it mechanical error, and then they'll take the appropriate action. So,
according to Defense One, and they're quoting Pentagon data, it shows deadly and costly military aircraft mishaps skyrocketed 55% over the past 4 years.
Wow.
Cause for alarm?
Definitely for concern. I love the devil's in the details. Was it mechanical error? Was it pilot error? Like what was the root cause of the issue? That matters. That really matters to all this. Is you really got to unpack that. But again, we are taxing our force. Right now, reduced force. We talked about earlier. We talked about munitions a little bit, but reduced capability in forces, but a skyrocket in demand signal. And, the military, our first priority is always the mission. So we're going to continue to push it to meet the mission. Sometimes most commanders will say the risk is too high. We're not going to do this. But under certain conditions, you're going to need to do it.
Also, you had mentioned North Carolina. The North Carolina National Guard has recently settled a First Amendment lawsuit.
Yeah.
You're smiling at this.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
So basically,
what are we doing?
a veteran, Timothy Stanhope, he was a retired guardsman who spent about 20 years in the military. He argued that he was pressured to retire over his social media posts.
Yes.
And they reached a settlement. He did not get any monetary relief. However, he was allowed to, again, access the Guard's official Facebook page. So at issue, he was taking on to Facebook and social media, Instagram, all of social media accounts, and basically critiquing leadership and military guidance. And so they revoked his privileges. And he said, I am exercising my First Amendment right to criticize, and I have all of this experience. So it's not like I'm just, criticizing. I have experience and I can and talk knowledgeably about these things. His attorney said he didn't violate any rules. He was never accused of violating anything. He was just told, we don't like your opinions, so therefore you can't be on our site. Thoughts?
That's the reason I had a social media policy as a commander, specifically for guys like this.
For active duty.
For active duty, but it applies to, would apply to guardsmen or reservists that were mobilized under my command. There's a proper use of social media. I mean, it's the official website, and I'm going to tell a tale of two stories here. So
we want all sides here on In Depth.
I love it. I'm going to give you a little bit of it. So yeah. I mean, even he said in a number of quotes that I've always been brash. So he's criticizing the chain of command. My question is, how did you approach this before you even got on social media? This is not a place to air it out, especially on an official website for that unit. And if you're disrupting, my social media policy, to boil it down, if you're disrupting the good order and discipline of an organization, you're in violation of the use of social media responsibly as a leader. Now, he's a senior non-commissioned officer. He's got junior soldiers underneath him. If he's doing this, now let's say his soldiers started doing the same thing, but about him, I'd be curious to know how he would feel about this. So I think it's just absolutely ridiculous. You're in the military. Yes, you're a citizen. You have First Amendment rights, but you forfeit some of that you just can't go off the reservation and just do crazy things. The blowback to this is that I've seen in the last 2 years a number of military organizations get rid of their official social media sites now, and now I'm seeing the reduction of number of websites across the board. So now a guy like me who's getting ready to go in to talk to a command, I want to know a little bit more about their commander, more about their mission. It's been reduced to almost vanilla ice cream, that it's like, okay, now I got to lean on my network to know more about an organization than I had to previously. So there's that. So during the great old COVID years, remember those, Christine?
Oh, my goodness, so long ago.
It's so long ago.
As an aside,
yeah,
I need to mention, I was talking with somebody yesterday, and we were both saying how bad we feel for the youngest generation right now, because they have dealt with so much garbage. COVID was just like the tip of it.
Yeah.
Or the foundation of it. It wasn't even the tip. There has been so much else that they have had to deal with. This poor generation, what are they going to say 30 years from now?
I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
They're going to be the most traumatized generation.
They may be. I don't know. Are you being facetious there?
No, I'm really not. I know that
it's got long-term effects for sure.
I know that we say that, they have it the easiest because of technology and everything else, but I don't think mentally they do.
I don't know. We'll see. I beckon back to a story I told this weekend about the active shooter incident that occurred at Fort Stewart last year, where, we talk about the younger generations, but the fact of the matter is when that individual started shooting, all those young people around him actually tackled him and took the weapon away. Mm-hmm. So I think there's definitely some goodness. So we'll see what occurs. But going back to the Tale of Two Cities, so no kidding, there I am, Chief of Staff at Benning, and then I got some questionable orders from the individual who was the commanding general at the time, and people were airing it on social media, and it got the attention of senior leaders in the Pentagon, which kind of came back full circle to better guidance and cease and desist at this time. So I guess this whole thing is, if somebody felt like, hey, this individual's violating my rights by doing a series of things like I'm a spouse coming through the gate and I don't have my mask on. Now they're going to ban me from I live on post, from getting access to posts. Things like that seem like an extreme policy to have, but that's an example of raising the flag to go, hey, there's something wrong here, and something needs to occur. So again, I'm on the side of, if you're breaking down good order and discipline, then that's an improper use of social media, especially in uniform. But on the flip side, if you got commanders and senior enlisted, advisors, if you will, doing their own thing and well outside regulations and policies, then maybe it's a good way to put a spotlight on it.
Every organization needs a troublemaker.
And we have one here at WOKV.
I have a name.
Do you?
I'm sitting right here, guys.
Something tells me he wasn't referring to you. We're going to return to our conversation with Chris Budihas, now retired Colonel Chris Budihas, host of First Coast Military Life. So the Pentagon changed the classification of a few deaths in Operation Epic Fury.
Yeah.
So the names of 4 service members who had died in the war with Iran have been moved to a different website, identifying them as people killed in overseas action. So the casualty database on the Defense Casualty Analysis System dropped the death toll count from 18 to 14 because there was a new category created called overseas operations. So rather than them being counted during active Epic Fury Iran conflict designations, they're now in this overseas operations category. And just out of respect for them, we will mention they are Private Isabella Gonzalez, First Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan, Sergeant Angel Rampersand, and Sergeant Michael Emmanuel Swinton, who was killed in Iraq. Rampersand was killed in Jordan, and Feehan was killed in Jordan as well. I don't know where Gonzalez was killed.
I believe it was also Jordan.
Okay. So first of all, is this significant
It's a slap in the face.
to those who died?
Well, it's to the military, to their specifically their families, and specifically the individuals themselves. So this is not an administrative indictment on them per se, but maybe it is. I don't know. What are we doing? I mean, the dead are dead. So if it's Epic Fury, the common person probably listening right now is going, I didn't know this till you mentioned this morning. It's Epic Fury to us. And now we have people going, is Epic Fury still going or not going? The amount of confusion here is unbelievable. But this is one of those moments like we're better than this. So what do you have to lose or to gain by changing their classification? Because at the end of the day, it's still Epic Fury, in my opinion. And somebody might out there who's uninformed would go, well, who cares? It doesn't matter, right? I'm just going to put on my tinfoil hat and just support whatever anybody tells me to do. It does matter because there's a potential, the effects of those individuals, whether they're married or whoever their SGLI, so their life insurance goes to, that will still occur. But what about other benefits? So if they're married and have children, the ability for their children to go to college and have those benefits, their spouse to go to college for free. Those things, you start to play with it, it's got downstream effects that actually have an impact on that specific family. So trying to hide the numbers, it just reeks of like a Vietnam-esque, we're going to hide things, and just tell you other stuff. And I just don't like it.
Some of the wounded, too, have been reclassified. So there were 482 people.
When we talk wounded, we're not talking, some of it's concussion wounds and things of that nature, which is pretty serious. I have issues from TBI myself after being blown up over 9 times. But what I will say this is that some of these wounded are like serious wounded, like missing limb type wounded. So this has an impact.
Getting shrapnel that, might stay with you forever.
Forever.
482 people were listed earlier in the week, last week, and then they changed it to 420 service members injured. And this is significant because it reclassifies those injuries for those 62, plus or minus, so far, who are injured. Because if you're injured in an operation, in a wartime operation, your classification and your benefits are different than if you're just injured, in a training.
And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. In this testimony is like there's effects, there's administrative and policy effects as a result of your classification. There's 2 specific forms when you fill it out for somebody that's been wounded or been injured in theater that you fill out as part of the casualty tracking card, and that ends up getting digitized, by the way. But that classification on the forward edge has an impact that goes back. Here's an example, and it's probably not a direct example specifically this, but I had a lieutenant that was wounded in Baghdad. Literally, a mortar round, an RPG round, blew up next to the individual or close to the individual. They took shrapnel. They were treated at the combat outpost there. They were sewn up, and then later medevac 2 days later, based on just combat operations. It just wasn't a good time to kind of medevac them, and then they were treated. The commanding general at the time, who, oh, by the way, was told to retire when he got back, refused to award him the Purple Heart because he wasn't medevaced immediately. No, he was wounded. Sir, read the orders, read the regulation. So this misinterpretation, as he saw it, of the orders has a lot. And he didn't get the award, Christine, until 8 years later. I mean, what a travesty for that individual.
How terrible that you have to fight for something like that.
Yeah, and so now superimpose that against this situation. What's the impact to these families who are probably, one, for those that died that are grieving, and then two, those families that will have a service member coming back that will not be able to continue their military service because they've been wounded, whether that's a shrapnel wound, a missing limb, whatever it may be, TBI to the point where they're cognitively unable to serve anymore, who will have to deal with their loved one being injured for the rest of their life. Again, what do we have to gain by this?
And not only not able to serve anymore, but also maybe not able to hold a job. I think a lot of civilians don't understand that when you come back from military service, if you have been wounded and you have some sort of a disability, those disabilities are ranked.
Oh, for sure.
So they'll say, maybe you're 10% disabled. And so we're going to give you 10% of your benefits that you would have gotten if you were 100% disabled.
Yeah.
And that is a very relative thing. I mean, we think that there are objective criteria for it, but it is a very relative thing because a lot of people hear, okay, well, I'm 20% disabled, and then they go back and get it reevaluated. Then, maybe 3 years later, they're 70% disabled.
Well, ironically, I'm in the space day to day, and so I'm extremely familiar with the VA's ability to rank and not. And I will say one thing about our VA here in Northeast Florida. You guys do a great job, so thanks for what you guys do out there. Because I am 100% service-connected disabled. And, yeah, for those who don't have the proper rating they deserve, that's a travesty. I spoke to one of my former soldiers from Afghanistan who was injured as a result of a suicide bomber who is 100% disabled. And he cannot work because of his physical wounds and then his the brain trauma that he incurred. And sometimes you don't know that right away. Well, no, sometimes it festers, right? And then his company commander, who's also 100% medically retired as a major from the irony was he took a lot of shrapnel, ball bearings to his body, but the things that actually got him disabled were the concussion damage to his head and then the wound of his hand, so just shooting hand, if you will. So, yeah, it's got long-term repercussions for these individuals and their families that have to take care of them in some capacity, or the state in many cases. So, yeah, I don't know what we're trying to achieve by just trying to cook the numbers and saying these four individuals weren't epic fury or any other capacity. But, yeah, for our population out there to do, why does it matter? Oh, it matters. It matters financially. It matters for long-term medical care through the VA. And it matters for the individual who feels, in some cases, most of the guys that I had feel some form of guilt because they left theater and they left their unit before they thought, and then they chose to serve, and if they were given the opportunity to continue to serve, they would choose to serve still because that's kind of the selfless leaders they are, but they physically and mentally cannot do that anymore. So,
could it also point to the fact that the administration is acknowledging that there might be a lot more deaths in the future, so if they want to reclassify them now so that these deaths are not associated with Operation Epic Fury the way the casualties of Vietnam were handled?
I think every administration since George Washington have recognized that, again, warfare from the American purview, the American way of war, there's a book written on it, is we like it cheap, fast, and bloodless. The bloodless thing, here's the reality. You cannot go to war and expect not to take any casualties. Yeah. The whole thing with Venezuela, I had somebody, it was just like, okay, that's a false parallel. What occurred there is not the same in what's happening here in Iran, and to think otherwise and try to convince me otherwise, I just wasn't going to agree with them. But yeah, it's a different situation. We get ourselves in a little bit of trouble when we don't understand the operational environment in which we're are going to operate in. And we saw that in Iraq, we saw in Afghanistan, and I was reminded also this week, General Petraeus, we had the surge in Iraq. And
General Petraeus, there's a name we haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, not a big fan. So, we had a surge in Iraq. It went pretty good. Again, it shows you, warfare is people-oriented. We brought down the violence. And so what do? We try to cut and paste like a PowerPoint slide what we did in Iraq to Afghanistan, and it didn't, the long-term effects, it didn't stick, if you will, because you're dealing with people. And the people on the ground are the people that live there. And the reality of it is you gotta understand the culture and what you're trying to get done. So, somebody asked me about this was back when the Russians invaded Ukraine for the second time. Is Putin a rational actor? I'm like, define rational. So it's rational to them may not be rational to us. So we got to understand from their position what they're willing or not willing to do, and to what level. So yeah, here's the deal. If we're going to stay, and we need to see this thing through, there's going to be more casualties. I don't think we need to spend more time, classifying or non-classifying, individuals, especially these numbers. It's not like they went from 480 something down to 3. You brought it down a couple of notches, and I think it's very unfair to those individuals.
It is, and I don't think that many people will talk about those, 62 people.
Well, they're not, but I will applaud you for being willing to have that conversation, right? Especially in a military town and with a very dense population of veterans. And I meet a lot of veterans on the street, the different events I go to. Most of these veterans there's very few World War II, really not many at all. There's some Korean, a lot of Vietnam vets here, and then up to the current level of wars that we've done here in the most recent time frame. So, and then this war continues on, and no doubt our sailors, our guardsmen, and others, our reservists will be over there serving and doing things that our country needs them to do to accomplish the mission. So.
They're doing the hard stuff so we don't have to.
Amen.
I'm going to give you a promotion right now. We're going to ask Admiral Commander Brad Cooper to step aside.
Oh,
you are
wow.
now in charge
Stop
of
it.
CENTCOM.
Yeah.
What would your priorities be for CENTCOM? Let's talk about Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, Greenland, because Greenland's still apparently part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Do we have enough on our plates that we don't need to be worrying with Iran, that we don't need to be worrying about Venezuela and Cuba? Or should Venezuela and Cuba be a part of this administration's?
We got to have that again goes to what level you operate at. If you're at the senior strategic level, in some cases people call it the grand strategy level, you're at the presidential, Secretary of Defense, all departments of the government. You got to look at the world globally, and serving at the command level, specifically Brad Cooper's position as a CENTCOM commander. The world's interconnected. So all these combined commanders, I sat literally backseated behind two of them a couple of years ago. They're always looking at the world interconnected wise, and they're looking at different forces, different capabilities. The services provide people and equipment to fight the wars. So no doubt he's looking at that. And then we talked about earlier about the KC-135s. We have a very small fleet compared to what we did back in the 90s coming out of the Cold War. So you got to look at everything, and then what is the tension on that, and what's your capacity. And so I know down in CENTCOM, the War Plans Division is no doubt, we mentioned this before, that there's been war plans, multiple war plans on the shelf that get dusted off every single year and get relooked to invade Iran. I'm not saying we're going to invade Iran, but those planners down there are taking a look at all options, giving the best military advice to Admiral Cooper, and no doubt he's taking that from his senior leader lens, talking to his peers, and then also communicating that back to the administration. But at the end of the day, our civilian bosses are the ones that are ultimately in charge, and that is the way our Constitution is built and the way it should be, and it should not ever be changed. As a professional from service in the military who's pretty well read on the military ethic and background, because there's always the argument, why don't you just hey, you politicians, you make decisions and let the admirals and generals fight the war uncuffed. It's just not how we operate. So, and nor should we change it for any specific person during any specific time. It should be a constant, because that's why America's so great.
Our defense contracting industry is benefiting from this war.
They always have.
They always have. It's a short-term economic boost, and some politicians have used that historically to bolster the economy.
Yeah. Are
we seeing a law of reverse returns at this point?
I don't know. It's been interesting. So about prior to this conflict with Iran, there still is a big push for defense. Wants to see more small to medium companies get in the defense space, because it is recognized that small to medium companies can be more innovative in tech. They can be more innovative in thought. They can move pretty quick. The problem is they can't scale quickly. It's funny. I got some companies I work with consulting, and they make a great device. Well, it's like, great, okay, you can make 5 a month. The Pentagon wants 5,000 a month. So how are you going to be able to mass produce these capabilities at the same quality at which you're producing? And that's the problem.
You're very much in this space on a day-to-day basis.
Live it every day.
You live it every day.
Yeah.
So, in all cases, does Joe Schmo technology company get eaten up by the Lockheed Martins?
They can be, or they can be a provider to the Lockheed Martins. So it was interesting. So they had this pivot to small to medium businesses, and then the Iran war kicked off, and so there was, and even you can look at articles from last fall and even previous to that, where the Pentagon was pivoting away from your Lockheeds, your Boeings, your Raytheons, your BAEs and such. However, those large organizations make large material solutions, and they've got both the capital, the workforce, and the facilities to produce at a mass scale. So there's been a kind of a pivot. I won't say pivot away from small to medium businesses, but there's been a re-emphasis and reinvestment, or I should say not really investment, but buying, if you will, from those organizations, because they make stuff. And
some of those organizations are directly connected to the administration. 1789 Capital, for example.
That's not new to the Trump administration. It goes back to every single administration. Even Eisenhower said, the irony is Eisenhower, basically he ran the European theater of war, retired 4-star, and now he's the president of the United States, and he's like the biggest threat to the American population is the military-industrial complex. And then
because he knew, right?
Because he knew, and then Smedley Butler, who the Marines will know out there, 2-time Medal of Honor winner, wrote in the book and I forgot the name of it. I'll bring it up next time I'm in the 1920s, talking about, the name of the book is War's a Racket. And he's writing about the banana wars, where we're sending in the Marines and the Army across the Latin America and into the Caribbean, to specifically in Honduras, Guatemala, San Salvador areas, to help with, of all things, Chiquita bananas and things of that nature. So to put down the local population or local rulers in order to help businesses do businesses overseas. I'm not saying that's going on right now, but there's definitely a tinge of it.
Ooh, the tease, Chris Budihas. Chris Budihas, we just have time for a quick thank you for joining us this morning. And again, just really quickly, what's happening on First Coast Military Life?
So this weekend, we have Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins on. We're going to talk about his military and public service and all things Florida.
Tune in on Sunday morning.
See, Sunday morning at 08, and that's 8 a.m. for you civilians. And then you can always find it at any of your podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts at. Go check it out. Love to hear from you. If you got any ideas, thoughts, we would send me a message at fcml@wokv.com. That's Foxtrot Charlie Mike Lima at wokv.com.
Chris Budihas, thank you. And thank you for listening.